My name is Shannon Wolf, and I'm the Managing Director and Chief of Staff at AAUW. Today, we have a wonderful program on creating allyship, led by Melissa Ingram Leduc, Chair of the Inclusion and Equity Committee and a National AAUW member, and Kay Bricado, State President of AAUW Mississippi. So pleased to be with you today to talk about allyship within the context of AAUW's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Toolkit. The Inclusion and Equity Committee has been working on a series of plug-and-play programs to assist branches in their diversity, equity, and inclusion programming. Past plug-and-plays have included topics on unconscious bias, creating inclusive spaces, and the differences between diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today's webinar and slide presentation will be available on the website shortly after today's program, so you will have access to those as well. Today's format will be quite simple and straightforward. Melissa will discuss the definition of allyship and then transition to Kay and our wonderful panel today to discuss various allyship efforts. And we'll preserve time at the end for questions. And with that, I think I will move it over to Melissa and hand it over to her. Melissa?
Awesome. So before we start, I always want to show where we can get to our tools in the toolkit so you all have a reference for where we are pulling our information. So there are two ways to get to the toolkit. And the first one is from the main AAUW page, to click on the membership button. Once you click on membership, then you'll click on governance and tools. The other way to do this from the main AAUW page is to click on the search feature, that magnifying glass, and then type in DEI toolkit. Either way, you will see the governance and tools page where the second link is labeled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Toolkit. Once you click on that, you will find the major highlights for the toolkit resources. And we like to start with the key terms and concepts where you can find today's information. So once you click on key terms and concepts, you will see this main page, this introduction to the various topics within DEI that we feel are important for the foundation of diversity, equity, and inclusion discussions. If you scroll down the page, you will see that we discuss diversity, inclusion, equity, and then today's topic, allyship. When you click on the allyship button, you'll find what we feel the basic definition of allyship is. And today, our definition of allyship, just as a foundational topic, is the state or condition of being an ally, which is just supporting other people or groups with our own efforts. So with that in mind, I will turn this over to Kay for her more in-depth discussion on allyship.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you all for attending this webinar today. We have a delightful panel to discuss some things we've done in the state of Mississippi. And so I will move through my conversation pretty quickly, but I do want to shout out to Shannon Wolf, because she's done such a great job of helping us have some flexibility on the terminology of diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, to the fact that even in the last month, folks are asking, should we use equity? Should we use diversity? Where are we? She said, AAUW encourages you to explore with language, but hold firm to the principles of these words. And so I want to shout out to our national office and the staff for all the work that Melissa and everyone has done. To start with, the title of this quick talk here is about 10 minutes, and then we're going to hear from some real boots on the ground stories, is belonging. And allyship means walking beside and behind. And what I want to make clear about that is that walking beside and behind does not mean beneath. So one of the hardest things to do with allyship is when you gain some access to power and centrality, is to not turn around and use those same negative energies that were used on you when you were a marginalized person. So belonging and allyship is a balancing game. Our legacy member, Helen Sims, was interested in becoming a national board member at one time for AAUW, and she really taught me how to think about things broadly. And so what you see here on slide 2 is one suggested reading about how the science is catching up with us. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking on these, but they're in the slide stack so that you all can share them after the meeting at your groups. I'll spend a little bit of time on this one because this is a slide of research that many of us are familiar with. Those 3 slides prior to this one are 3 reports on some empirical science that's presented by epidemiologists and public policy health specialist. This slide is what's typically used for groups of learners. The seminal science of Maslow's hierarchy of need suggests that we really need to read the room if we're going for strong allyship. We need to notice who's dominant and who's underrepresented. We need to look at the visual signs that are present and not present, and we need to seek other ways to measure power. We can do this by resisting the urge to be at the center. We think of ways of gathering with people who are like us, and that's what we typically do. We usually gather with people who look about like us and who seem to be similar to us, but there are plenty of examples in nature where we ally ourselves and other creatures of the earth ally themselves with species and creatures that are not like them. And it is a natural urge, although not most thought about. So when we're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of need, we've always known that we have to have our physiological needs met and we have to have our safety needs met. But there was at one point an idea that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And what we've come to find out is that words can truly indeed cause some scientific differences in our body. It is now known that, and I'm going to read this to get this right, the status of not belonging brings a fight or flight response, but it can be mitigated by finding a sweet spot of belonging. Our bodies actually produce a special cocktail of hormones served up by the adrenal system and others that we are only now coming to understand. Things like obesity, conditions like obesity, addiction, heart disease, and other comorbidities can actually be warded off from learning to find the sweet spot of belonging, the sweet spot of standing up, the sweet spot of not fighting or fleeing. We have to have allies to help us find that sweet spot in the reaction to stress. And we can do that if we think about if we think about who we are, if we find our own unique beauty, if we honor that beauty, if we listen and follow directions and the wishes of others, if we practice this space where we go really, really close to folks and then we feel a little ouch moment and we back up a little bit, but we stay in the game. And then if we're prepared to make mistakes and admit our mistakes and apologize for them and move on. I cannot tell you how many times Dr. Anderson has had I've made mistakes and I've had to go to her and say, I'm sorry, help me. Helen Sue Parrish, I've made mistakes and I've had to go to Helen Sue Parrish and say, I'm sorry, help me. Our AAUW members in our branches are allies to us, and especially if we will ask forgiveness and admit mistakes. So I could talk a long time about ideas of belonging and allyship, and on the backside of our panel, perhaps there's a little bit more time for discussion of the previous slides, but I'd like to go on and look at so AAUW Mississippi member leaders who are going to share with us today are Mayor Lynn Sproul of the city of Starkville, Dr. Corinne Anderson of the STAND organization. STAND is Sisters Taking Action Nurturing Decision Makers. Lindsey Lyle is a Tougaloo College student. Maria Serratos will not be with us today. She has traveled from Jackson, Mississippi, where she gave a speech at the Equal Pay Press Conference this morning and had a car accident. So please be thinking positively about Maria. Next, we'll hear from President Jane Hulon of Copiah Lincoln Community College, and then we'll hear from President Nora Miller of Mississippi University for Women. I'd like to start by turning the spotlight and microphone over to Mayor Lynn Sproul. I'm going to mute myself and turn off my camera.
Okay, well, thank you, Kay. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to visit with you folks and be on this panel. And Kay had asked me to do this and to give a sense of what being an ally means to me. And so as a female mayor, I am a longtime advocate for the value that women bring to every organization. It is my goal, and I believe it's my duty to make certain that women fully understand that they have a vital place in our city. And being highly visible and accessible is also part of the public servant role that I think creates an understanding that women are in leadership positions and have a future in being present in those decision-making processes. Starkville, Mississippi is a very diverse community. As a college town, we have the opportunity to learn from a wider range of viewpoints and backgrounds than so many small towns have. That appreciation of diversity and difference tends to be a challenge to many small towns. It is much less so in a university town, but in many ways, we are still a work in progress. And I, like Kay, ask for help on any number of occasions from so many people who are smarter than I am. I confess, however, it amazes me that women, and we comprise more than 50% of the population, are underrepresented in decision-making roles. I have never understood that. It saddens me that we are often content to be so. Contentment with the status quo does not lead to greatness, in my opinion, and I think women are destined for greatness. We just have to grab it. I view it as my responsibility to encourage and sometimes to push to the point of being obnoxious, so I'm told, those women around me to get involved. More often than not, we as women defer, and deference is not our friend. It's not our future. Part of the growth in learning, and one of the best learning tools, is listening. And foremost, the concerns of those marginalized groups is listening to them. As women, we tend to be silent and do not insist on being heard. We need to help the privileged others in leadership positions hone their listening skills. And I think that's up to us to help them do that. I want to do my part to make certain that being an ally includes pushing for inclusion of women and other marginalized groups in determining the course of my city, our city, and through that, the quality of all of our lives. And that is pretty much how I view what my goal is as an ally to my constituents, both the ones who are of privilege and those who are marginalized, so that we can get together and try to figure out how to make it the best place that we can make it for all of us. Thank you, Kay. I appreciate it. And I apologize for my voice. I didn't have a car wreck, but I don't have much of a voice either. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this today.
Thank you, Mayor. And these are strange times, and just the stick-to-itiveness for you to be here means a lot. So thanks so much. Let's move on and hear from our next panelist. I believe it's Lindsey Lyle. All right, Lindsey, talk to us about allyship. What does it mean to you?
Hello. I knew I wanted to be a part of the change for women's equality as early as elementary school. The teacher would ask, who wants to help me move chairs? And as soon as I brought forth any energy to volunteer myself, I was turned away with an excuse, only boys. It's a phrase that always made me feel less than. And I realized from a young age that as a girl, I would be treated differently. I was brought into the American Association of University Women by a family friend and authority figure at Tougaloo, Ms. Demetria White. She knew about my passion as an equal rights advocate, and I attended an internship with the Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable, American Association of University Women, Mississippi Women's Economy Security Initiative, and STAND, or Sisters Taking Action, Nurturing Decision Makers, over the summer of 2021. At this internship orientation, I furthered my education of the knowledge surrounding the unequal treatment of women, especially in the workplace. I believe getting into the community and working with others to spread the message for advocacy is how I ally myself. I volunteer at churches, I work as a child care specialist, and I provide help and tutoring. And one of the things I've noticed, and many times, the leader of many organizations or organizational causes is a man. Everyone says representation is key. So if I or women are not represented in leadership efforts, how can we feel that we belong to become leaders ourselves? I'm an active ally because I want to be a role model, and I want to pave the pathway for generations to come so they do not have to face the realization of limitations women endure. And I want other women who observe me to feel like the sky is not the limit, because truly we can move beyond what we see to see for a universe of possibilities.
Thank you, Lindsey. Lindsey's been a standout for us in our efforts to try to push some good equal pay policy through our state legislature. We're the last state in the country with none. And so we are working diligently to attempt to get some really strong policy. Our next panelist comes to us from Copiah Lincoln Community College. We invite President Jane Hulon to the spotlight. Dr. Hulon, President Hulon, tell us a little bit about what you think in terms of allyship. You unmute real quick.
Sorry about that, guys and girls. Let's carry on. My name is Dr. Jane Hulon Sims. I'm a newlywed, and I tacked on an extra name there. I am the president of Copiah Lincoln Community College, which is a small rural two-year college located in Southwest Mississippi. And I'm honored today to speak to you regarding allyship and the way that I've utilized this concept in my own life and my career. So what is allyship? One definition that we were provided from AAUW from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary was the state or condition of being an ally, the supportive association with another person or group. And I found another one that I kind of liked as well. It says a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, and accountability with individuals and groups of people. Well, let me tell you that I'm a firm believer in relationship building. And over my lifetime, I have come to understand the value of building strong groups of allies to call upon when needed, both personally and professionally. I grew up on a farm with 3 brothers and 1 sister, and we had a lot of work to do on that farm. And you better believe that things worked out much better when we found a way to get along and work together. Professionally, through my career, I've seen it time and time again that none of us is as smart as all of us. And I've recognized the value of teamwork. And I strive to develop effective work groups and teams in getting things accomplished at my college. Luckily here, I have a strong administrative team, many of who are women, and I'm proud of the important work that we do together on behalf of our students, our employees, and our citizens. This team has been extremely effective in facing the challenges posed by the global pandemic. You may or may not be aware that none of us really studied about how to deal with an enormous global-wide pandemic in any of our graduate courses, at least I didn't. And so nonetheless, I'm very proud of how our employees and our students responded. One specific example was last year's AAUW online state convention for Mississippi. Members of my team served as the technical support for delivering what I would consider a successful professional state convention on Zoom. And now, you know, I can say, looking back, that we did it together. We worked very hard, and I'm so proud. My final thought to you is to stress the importance of showing gratitude and the recognition of the efforts of our allies. As a college president, I'm very quick to recognize the phenomenal leaders who've come before me, who incidentally were men. I am, by the way, again, the first female president here. And I try to point out the successes that were come before me as president, and I try to build upon the foundation that they have laid. But I am blazing a new trail here. In addition, I try really carefully not to take the sole credit for any successes that my college experiences.
Andy, can you bring me my charger?
And I do try to make it a point to stress how hard we all work together. And I think that's the important part of being an ally, at least how I see it. I believe that allyship can be very helpful, very meaningful, very effective, and very efficient, and it's definitely encouraged. And I do thank Kay for the opportunity to add my 2 cents.
Thank you, Dr. Hulon, President Hulon. I think that the convention video speaks for itself. There's such a camaraderie of allyship there, and it's unique to note that we had 2 men on our panels last year, and I think that really speaks to the idea that we are honoring this allyship piece, because the numbers in the room are what dictates who's marginalized. And most always when AAUW gathers, women are the dominant group. And we don't think about the women who have blue hair who are not in the room, those who are mobile by wheelchair who are not in the room. We don't think about the men who could be there that aren't, and who are allies to us and have been before us. So I'm glad you brought up that point, Dr. Sims. The next person on our list is President Nora Miller. Nora Miller is the president of MUW, Mississippi University for Women. President Miller, what do you have to tell our group today about allyship?
Well, to me, allyship means being supportive of others and advancing the interests of marginalized groups. I'm proud to lead a university that was founded on the principle of providing higher education opportunities to an underserved population. Mississippi University for Women was founded in 1884 as the first state-supported college for women. We became coeducational in 1982, but we remain true to our founding principle of serving the underserved. Women, minorities, members of the LGBTQA+ community, and economically disadvantaged people continue to be underserved by society. Our university's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council has sponsored a project the last 2 years. It's called a Unity Project. And there are personal identifiers. There are poles placed around a circle, and they have things like, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a dog person, I'm a cat person, I'm an ally, I'm LGBTQA, number of things. And there's a center pole, and everyone goes to that center pole and they take skeins of yarn and they tie up the different identifiers that they personally identify with. And it's a tangible way to see how we all are connected somehow and how we support each other and hold each other up. And it's a beautiful thing when this is complete, when you've had hundreds of people come through and tie off their identities, and you see how we are all connected. Allyship requires one to recognize one's own privilege and to recognize marginalized groups and to listen to those groups and to consistently act in ways that support those groups. An important way, I think an important first step is when you join an organization, a meeting, a gathering, sit with somebody who doesn't look like you and start up a conversation. And that's one way to get started on this allyship, and listen and see what their needs are and what they're wanting and find a way to support them. Today is Equal Pay Day in Mississippi, and we support the Senate bill that has been introduced that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, race, or ethnicity, and providing equal pay. And it's a crime that we're having to fight for this in 2022. And so I am proud of those who are allying with us to see about better pay and equal pay for women and for all. So that's in a nutshell kind of what allyship is to me. Thank you.
Thank you, President Miller. I'm so glad that we moved through our intro slides early to hear from our panel. It's just so much more exciting and real when people have true ideas and things that we could practice. So now that we've made some progress through our panel, we still have Dr. Corinne Anderson to hear from. And what I'd like to say on her behalf is that her conversation today would talk about a group called Sisters Taking Action, Nurturing Decision Makers. And somewhere around 2009, Dr. Anderson and myself were approached about being leaders at the state level for AAUW. And at the same time, STAND was born. And Dr. Anderson put this coalition together with many, many, many women's groups all across the state of Mississippi. AAUW was a founding member, but it was only one of probably 30 groups that she put together into a coalition and has continued to communicate with for all these years. It's not the first time that's been done, but it was the more recent time that it's been done, and it was done specifically for the purpose of joining multiple ethnicities, multiple economic levels, multiple religions, belief systems, interest groups together in a coalition to be allies for all things that bring parity and fairness for women and girls. And so STAND is to be commended for its work. And through AAUW's connection with STAND, we have gained membership that represents a much broader group of people. We don't look all the same because STAND reached out to us. We don't look the same, believe the same, feel the same either. But the help that we gain through a coalition like STAND is that when people come into the room, they see a variety of kinds of people, and it makes for a much more welcoming space. Today, again, as President Miller told us, is Equal Pay Day. There has been a number of people down at the state capitol caucusing and advocating for some kind of good equal pay policy. But starting back in the summer on the campus of MUW at an event called New Leadership, there were a good number of women brought together for presentations by AAUW, by STAND, by women all over the state of Mississippi who are professionals, or elected officials. Talked to this group of people, young women who registered in the New Leadership week-long seminar. There we gathered a few volunteers, and then I blanketed my campus with requests for students, and these students applied for an internship. Several of Mississippi State University students were chosen, several of MUW students were chosen, Tougaloo students, Jackson State University, Mississippi University of Southern Mississippi. So we had students from all over the state come together on August the 5th and learn about allying our campuses together using digital outlets. And so I think this group is at different places in their degree programs. They are certainly in different majors. And as I said, they study on different campuses, but they bonded. And the Mississippi Women's Economic Security Council and the Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable, plus STAND and AAUW as supporting groups, we're just delighted to meet this group. And I've continued to stay in touch with 12 of them, and they are working tirelessly to get a degree. And if you will notice, what we've asked them to do is prioritize that. Prioritize the work of completing your degree, because that's what we're all about in AAUW. Then when you have a little minute, could you help us with number 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the list? I think that's the very essence of allyship, is that we have not prescribed a task set for them to complete. What we've asked them to do is work on your studies, be a great student, earn that degree, and in your free time, carve out a time to go have a cup of coffee with somebody and talk to them about what it means to you to have equal pay, what it will mean to you when you go back to pay back your student loans and you make less than your equivalent other. So we've let our younger members do what they want to do. We've let them pitch into the Equal Pay Initiative cause however they want to. We've let them prioritize their own work. We have stood beside them and behind them and allowed a spectrum of engagement in AAUW. We teach the fellow members about strategies to pitch in with equal pay, but we do not insist that they practice any of them. And then we step back and we stand beside and behind these younger members and we ask them to do what they choose to do. And so in March at our spring convention, we will give a gift, some honorarium. It might be $50, it might be $250, but we are asking for contributions to help these students who are helping Mississippi move forward by their efforts for equal pay. We want to give them a gift. We want to say thank you to them. And so you can use the QR code there, or you can ask for a flyer after this by sending me email, or if you are able to see that tiny print, my email is there. I can also put it in the chat, but we feel like we have made allies of some younger members because they have been very interested in this cause and they wanted to know how to engage. And the Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable, the Mississippi Economic Security Initiative, STAND, and AAUW have been very active in trying to stay connected. I'm not going to say it's been a walk in the park. I'm not going to say it's been just as comfortable as it might be. We sometimes don't agree on things. We sometimes have some bumps in the road in our relationship. But the key is to mitigate that urge to fight each other, mitigate that urge to run away from each other, but instead get in the center and stand up and be allies together. And so I think we've made a lot of progress in the past several years. So that concludes the Mississippi section. That's our last slide, and I'll turn it back over to Melissa Ingram now.
Thanks so much. I think at this point in time, we can open this up to questions, but before that, Tremaine, if you go to the next slide, please. We do want to leave you with some literature and video resources for the topics that we've talked about today. These slides and this webinar will be available on the AAUW website after this webinar is complete. For those of you that are interested in our plug and play programming, these programs are really lessons and facilitation events that we hope that you use within your various teams to explore topics within diversity, equity, and inclusion. So next slide. Our plug and play programming can be found in the DEI Toolkit under the Toolkit resources. Please click on the plug and play DEI programming link. And then today's topic, the Creating Allyship plug and play program, follows the same 4 topics or 4 sections that the rest of our plug and play programs have. We have an overview, ways that you as a facilitator can prepare for your event, the expectations for your event, and that goes for facilitator expectations as well as participant expectations, and then how to walk through your event. For those of you that are interested, Shannon did place in the chat the link that takes you straight to the plug and play programs. The overview for our Creating Allyship plug and play program really just sets the tone for the topics that you will discuss. So we recommend that this is a 1-part program, and we suggest using least an hour to go through this, but again, if you have more engagement, please use as much time as you need to fully explore your members' thoughts on this or any other topic. So as part of the facilitator preparation, we suggest, of course, that you read what AAUW has on allyship and our thoughts on allyship. Again, we provide a base level that you then can use for further discussion. And then we do have additional resources such as videos, readings, both online journals and books on allyship. And we suggest using at least one video, or in this case, one video, but you can also use a reading to use as a discussion point, a commonality for your event. Of course, we suggest taking notes so that you can use it at later times, as all of these diversity, equity, and inclusion topics do intertwine. So we hope that the way that we've laid these out ends up being a great kind of a pathway for deeper DEI exploration. And then again, our expectations. We lay out what we feel the facilitator should do during the event and before the event. And then we also want to lay out expectations for the participants, so everyone gets as much out of it as they can. And then in terms of implementing the program, anyone that wants to implement this plug and play, we give rough timelines for each part of the program, such as the introduction, the body of the event, and then how to conclude and tie it to other topics. Our next DEI webinar will be on intersectionality and be held on March 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We did hear from a lot of our members that 4 p.m. Eastern may not be as conducive for attendance. So we'll try out 7 p.m., but please give us your feedback on times that are great for you. And if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, we would love to hear from you. Please send us an email at the diversity@aauw.org email, and we'll be sure to answer it. And with that, I believe that is the end of our slideshow. Shannon, I will turn it over to you.
If I could jump in right quick, I think we have an opportunity to hear from Dr. Anderson. She's on my phone, and I'm going to try to put her up to the microphone. Let's see if you guys can hear her. Dr. Anderson, what would you tell us today about allyship?
In terms of how effective it is here, particularly in working with the groups here, you may have mentioned it, and I'm truly apologizing because I'm just going nuts with this computer here. But to make the simple statement is we have been fortunate in terms of, back in 2013 when AAUW Mississippi and a couple of the other organizations decided that we could not be as effective alone as we could if we joined together. And so we did organize, 20 women's organizations came together in our capital city, City Hall, and we decided to form an organization called STAND, which is Sisters Taking Action and Nurturing Decision Makers. And I think that alliance formulated back then, we didn't know about these wonderful terms now, but we knew about the concept of being more effective when we were down in the hall of legislature. Just to show today, we were there today with the equal pay. Everybody knows equal pay is the last state in the union to be in Mississippi, to come to Mississippi. And today we were down again with our legislators. We feel we've made some progress, but we did get a bill out of the Senate. We're not really happy with it, but it's a bill out, and now we're working on the House. And there were 12 women's organizations there together today instead of one at a time going down, which they will do later. The idea of cooperating together and having a common agenda is very, very important when you're trying to make an impact, particularly on the issues that affect women.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. And that was a very roundabout way to get your voice heard. So I'm glad we stuck with it, just like women always do. I'm going to mute my microphone now and turn back over to Shannon Wolf. And Shannon, if we could, favor for me before we go, everybody turn their camera on and we can get a screenshot of all these beautiful faces. It would make me happy, but we may not have time.
I certainly would love to do that. Like we have everybody coming in, maybe. While we wait for that, I think it would be great to get started with some questions. And if you have questions, please do throw them in the Q&A. We also had a number of questions come through from the registration. So those of you who took time to do that, I do appreciate that. It really helps us sort of understand what folks are thinking and what you want to know in response to this webinar. So I'd love to start with this question, which is, how do we help branch leaders who want to do this work but don't know how to get started? And I think I want to start with Melissa on this one, because I think this does speak directly to the diversity, equity, and inclusion toolkit that we have. And then I'd love to get Kay and whoever else wants to speak on this topic as well. Melissa?
I am so sorry. I was reading over the questions in the chat and did not hear the other questions. So can you please repeat?
Of course. It's just, how do we get started? You know, the common thread in the questions are, it's so much information. You know, you try to Google DI topics and how to get started with the work, and it's just, there's a lot of information out there, including on our own website. I mean, the DEI toolkit is amazing, but there's also a lot of information there as well. So how would you recommend folks get started, particularly branch leaders who want to bring more of this into their programming?
Absolutely. And that is a great question. What we tried to do, and you know, the I&E committee did struggle with trying to lay this out in a usable start to finish format for our states and our branches and anyone else that wants to use this. And what we decided is that the first step is figure out how to have a difficult conversation, which is why we refer to the how to have a difficult conversation, how to do conflict management in your teams. And from there, then do your community agreement, right? Figure out where your goals are in your teams, in your branches, in your states. And then once you figure out where your goals are and where you're coming up short in meeting your goals, now you can target your efforts on, do I need to create more allies? Do I need to understand more about diversity? Do I need to focus on creating a diverse membership base? Or do I just need to appeal to the members that we currently have? So I think that creating goals and figuring out where your team may fall short in the goals. So your baseline is the place to start, because unfortunately, any team, right, without doing that, you may be addressing problems that don't actually exist, or going after things that are pie in the sky goals, which are amazing, but you don't have the right steps to get there because you haven't addressed that baser issue. So that's a long-winded answer to say, I would start with where you are and where you want to go. And then from there, hopefully the things in the toolkit are laid out in a fashion that you can pick and choose now what works based on what your goals are.
I think I would add to that great conversation about where you are and where you want to go. This little visual I put on the board in the classroom where I am is AAUW is all are welcome, especially you, with a dotted line around it. And I know that's a silly little visual, but if we create a welcoming environment where everyone can come together and then create a boundary that is not firm or solid and excluding, we don't have to feel so stressed about ideas of men becoming a strong part of AAUW, which we desperately need. We've allowed men to be members since the mid-70s. We wouldn't feel so maybe threatened by others taking over our space because we realize that it's a safe space that has a boundary, but we need to loosen those boundaries. We're not going to change overnight, but we desperately need to evolve into a group that looks much more like a cross section of our country. And so I guess that would be my 2 cents
Great, thank you, Kay and Melissa. Anyone else want to comment on this question? Maybe potentially on allyship in itself. You know, how do you get started in when you're thinking about this work?
Y'all don't be shy now. Should I call on someone? I see a idea bubble maybe coming over Mayor or President Miller's head. How do you get started when you want to build a program that is all about ally?
I think the president is probably better suited than I to that. I come with a whole group of folks that are allied towards city government, and you know, each one has their own particular interest in the things that cities do, which are highly diverse, whether it's water and sewer, or it's police, or it's fire, or it's you know, streets. There are multiple things. So each one focuses in the government around a different thing. So it becomes a little more difficult. Depending on the subject matter, I can create some allies really quickly, because if I pull one in particular, I can get them from multiple parts of the community. But you know, creating a group of allies is offering them an opportunity. A lot of times, one of the things that's frustrating about city government is you ask for input and you don't get it, and you seek it again and you still don't get it. So I find myself frustrated frequently that you can't implore them, you can't bribe them, you can't get that feedback. And so I don't know how to make people get more engaged than they are. Even wanting to create space for people to share their thoughts with you, it is extremely difficult. And so I don't have the answer, but I can pick a topic that I bet I can bring some folks around on, but it won't be a good one.
I think the important thing is to, you know, build communities, to build organizations that are diverse and varied, and spend some time getting to know each other and focusing on the different needs of each community within that. It's difficult, but people have to just be willing to have some difficult conversations and to go through some scenarios. I think sometimes some role playing, some tabletop kind of things that get people in more of a theoretical space than an actual project can open up some thought and get people to start thinking in other ways than they usually do.
Well, President Miller, I like that idea. And in the chat, there's a great idea to go with that, is that the things you're saying kind of help us get comfortable with the discomfort we might feel. There's a comment that says, I guess the early part of this process includes our willingness to make mistakes and be uncomfortable. And so having toolkit activities from our own AAUW toolkit or your own very creative brain, and doing things that encourage coming to the table for camaraderie and fun, having fun together. I have a joke. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I'm going to tell this joke because I think it's kind of fun. My early career, my first degree was in English language arts. I'm an English teacher, and people say, well, how'd you get into diversity? And I think about our room right now, and I've got a message to show you that only women can understand. And it's a science kind of answer in the end. It's a little riddle, but can you guys understand this right here? It's a message that only women can understand. I don't know anybody in the room, maybe some people could, or perhaps you might understand this a little bit better. And then I'm going to reserve the English for the very end of our meeting, because we may have some gentlemen in our room that would not enjoy the English version of this. But I'm going to tell you that if you are in an engineering building on most any campus, what you can find is a mother's room now. And there'll be signage about what that mother's room is there for. And it's in all kinds of languages. And it's for women in a men's place. The College of Engineering has traditionally, like Lindsey told us, been really inundated with tons of men, and now we're seeing change. If you walk to the back of this building where I sit, you will see a food pantry that's organized by a student group for our economically challenged students. It's a free take food away as you need it, open classroom or it's a little space. It's not even a closet. It's a nice, comforting, welcome space. There's a convenience store right there with honor system. You pay with credit with a little scanner. There's no people that man it. And it's a new way of thinking about things in these university settings, which we are, proponents of, that really move us forward and take big steps. So I think language and realizing that we think, all women will understand this message. Well, maybe they will, but maybe we have to work to understand what that universal women's message is. We all know what a mother's room is, and we all know what the bathroom signs say in our own particular gender. That's science. We are women, there are men, we have LGBTQ unisex bathrooms now. So we're stepping forward into spaces that are welcoming, have that dotted line, and it's hard for us. We're switching pronouns for people as they ask us to do. It's new. It's a change. And so I think embracing that takes a lot of tabletop, as President Miller talked about.
Thanks to all. I think that's really important. We had a couple of questions that came in through the registration that talked about sort of this idea of showing up as a genuine person, right? How can I genuinely present as an ally when I'm in these spaces? And I think part of that comes back to this willingness to be uncomfortable and to have some interactions that may get you out of your comfort zone, or sit down, as President Miller said, you're in a meeting, you sit down next to somebody who you may not normally have done before, or that you don't know, and start a conversation with them. So just wondered if you could all speak a little bit about your experiences with that, and sort of how you strive to be genuine in your allyship work. Okay, can we start with you? You're on mute.
Unmute. There we go. I think recently I had a conversation with a colleague who I greatly admire about titles. My father-in-law was he's 92, and he's an advocate for women soldiers, and was a regular Army and became a colonel. And so I had this conversation with a colleague about titles and how much esteem is held in our titles. And so I think one of the hard parts about being a university professor, having your PhD, is that title to a lot of people just doesn't mean anything. But if you're in a military setting and you don't use the military titles, that's just against protocol and decorum, and it's not okay. And so I think one new thing that I thought I had a handle on it, Shannon. I thought I was good at that. I thought I got the title thing down. I know how to refer to people with their name. And I got crossed up with a really important colleague of mine. And I think we learned both how to bond back and just admit, we don't have a handle on things. I'm going to make mistakes. And I had to apologize, and just say, look, my understanding was different, and I didn't mean to do that. And I didn't mean to offend. And, you just walk forward side by side, not beneath, but beside and behind. And that putting people beneath you, that is an act of fear that we need to stop. When we're afraid, we start to use things that put people beneath us. We condescend. And so I think we really need to think about beside and behind, not beneath. So that's just a summary. That's a real true story.
Thank you, Kay. President Hulon, anything from you?
I could just add that I think in life there's three kinds of people. You've got those that sit back and watch things happen, those that make things happen, and those that just wonder what happened. And I've tried to be one of those that make things happen. And I'm telling you, it just takes a lot of courage. And as we step out to make some change, we just need to think about, you know, that we may not be perfect, but we need to be willing to try.
Very true. Thank you so much. And I think we have Dr. Anderson back. Dr. Anderson, if you're back with us, is there any last words you'd like to say before we wrap up?
The demons of the computer are at work here. And in terms of that, that's all. I have to say two things. I've listened, and thank you for the transcript that was going at the same time, because I was able to look and to listen that way. So I really do appreciate that. I heard everything everyone said, and I'm certainly in agreement with that. But, you know, I was thinking of President Helen Sims' last statement. And sometimes when you're trying to walk beside and behind, every once in a while, you're allowed to take the lead, particularly if you're feeling that you're one who is marginalized and people are constantly expecting you to follow. So in our efforts, when we notice that there are people who are capable of taking the lead, sometimes we have to give them a gentle push and let them do that.
Great, thank you. Well, we are about out of time. We love to stay on time here to respect everyone's plans. I know everyone's super busy, but I just wanted to say thank you to all of our panelists today, to Melissa and to Kay and to just everyone. It's been a really wonderful discussion today. For those of you who are participating, please fill out the post-webinar survey. It really helps us understand sort of things we could do better, things that we did well, and helps us understand topics that you may be interested in for upcoming webinars. As Melissa mentioned, the next Plug and Play is on Thursday, March 24th, and the topic on that is intersectionality. So that is going to be a wonderful program, I know. And please note that that webinar is at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And it will be recorded as all of our webinars are, and put on the website afterwards if that time is not convenient for you. So with that, I will just say thank you again for all of you participating and taking the time today. Really appreciate it, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks all.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.